Sugarloaf Township, Jane Doe. Identified as Margaret Wininger. We begin here today in Sugarloaf Township, Pennsylvania, which is currently a town of around 4,000 people. In December of 1994, when this takes place, there was around 3,500 people there. Bones were found on a steep embankment overlooking a water-filled strip mine. The area itself was pretty wooded, and it was located around 2 miles from the West Hazleton exit off Interstate 81, a mine reclamation project, when a surveyor found a pelvic bone. Upon investigation, they were determined she had been lying on the dirt road for at least a few months, but possibly even a few years. Isotope tests would determine she was not from the area, suggesting she'd lived in Texas, Florida, or other states in the southern part of the U.S. I've been pretty open about my dislike of isotope tests because I don't think they're very accurate, and in this case, it would turn out to be incorrect also. They were able to tell she was missing 10 teeth, 4 of which were lost post-mortem. They could tell that she had given birth to at least one child and was right-handed. She had arthritis in her back and her leg. She was wearing a t-shirt that said, "Kiss my A, I'm on vacation," as well as sweatpants. They did find what was described as a foreign metal fragment that was located in her lower jaw. They were unable to determine her COD, but they believed it was likely foul play. DNA would eventually determine our Jane Doe was a 44-year-old woman named Margaret Carol Wininger, who grew up in Hazleton, Pennsylvania, moving to Philadelphia, which is about 13 miles or 21 kilometers away from where she was found. We do know she went missing in the early 1990s, but it's not clear exactly when. This is another one where they need people to call in at the number given here. They need tips in order to bring Margaret's case to justice. Margaret Carol Wininger went unidentified for 29 years. Had she lived, she would be 73 years old today. The Knoxville John Doe, identified as Elbert Brown. An accident would take place in May of 1993 in Knoxville, Tennessee. A 911 call was placed to report a pedestrian being struck by a vehicle near Cedar Bluff Road. They placed the man between 51 and 60 years of age. He had a reddish-gray beard and an orthopedic rod in his right leg. They thought they would be able to find his name through that injury, given it was recent enough that it hadn't fully healed. Unfortunately, that didn't happen. The manufacturer had discarded their records involving the device, and there was no way to trace it. He was also wearing a black wooden cross on a black cord chain. Thankfully, the TBI, Unidentified Human Remains DNA Initiative, came in, and they would process his DNA, using Genetic Genealogy to give Elbert Lewis Brown his name back. Elbert was born on July 1st, 1940, growing up in York, South Carolina. He was last seen by family members in 1962. This was a year before he was struck by the vehicle. Very little is offered other than this, but this would place him at 52 years old around the time of the accident. Elbert Brown went unidentified for 30 years. He was found 220 miles or 354 kilometers from home. Had he lived, he would be 82 years old today. The Hampshire Barn Man in Hampshire, New England. A huge thanks to Casparillo for the suggestion of this John Doe case. I am so impressed by the 3D views. It was really interesting and a little bit different from the cases I usually find. We begin today in Micheldever, England. On December 1st, 2017, the police entered a barn in the process of investigating an unrelated burglary. This was on Baisley Corpse Road in Hampshire, England. The man had no signs of injury or any indication of foul play, nor does it appear it was a choice that he made for himself. They believe he likely was a transient who had walked 7 miles from Winchester and began sheltering in the derelict barn. It's believed he had probably been there a year before he was found. That alone is pretty heartbreaking, passing in what they describe as a barn, but as you see here from the pictures taken by investigators, it looks to me like an ancient house with a carport. So I don't know if he was outside or found inside what looks sort of like a house to me. But either way, it was impossible to determine how long he'd been there. As I mentioned, he'd likely been there for a year or longer. They felt he had a little bit of an overbite. They were able to extract some DNA from his teeth, but all it really told them was that he was not in a criminal database. They would run testing that indicated he grew up in Corsica, which is in southeastern France or western Switzerland, and ate a diet heavy in fish. It doesn't specifically mention if this was isotope testing, but I suspect it must be. A plea was sent out through the media in hopes of identifying our John Doe, and this ended up with multiple witnesses coming forward, and they were able to describe a man that they met in the summer of 2012. And this man closely matched our John Doe. They had showed up at their home in Stoke, which is about 5 miles or 8.5 kilometers away from where our John Doe was found. And so this man knocked on their door, again, this is 5 years earlier, 2012, and asked if he could pitch a tent in their field because he was lost. They were agreeable to him doing this and even offered to share a meal with him. And it was from this meal that they remembered things that he shared about himself. He had a strong French accent, but his English was very good. They believed him to be 35 to 50 and around 5'8" or 172 centimeters. He would tell them that he had a French military background and that he was hard of hearing in one ear due to a military accident. They also described what they called a military bearing about him, saying that how he held himself and organized his own belongings made them believe what he was saying. Unfortunately, 5 years had passed and they couldn't recall what he said his name was. He had mentioned that he was passing through while traveling to either Ireland to meet his girlfriend or Canada, although Ireland is more likely. He made a memorable claim saying he had worked for French actress Catherine Deneuve, although her agency couldn't confirm it and it doesn't appear they were ever able to speak to her. At the end of dinner, he reluctantly accepted a little bit of money and food from the people who owned the land, and that was the last time they ever saw him. Because the details match up with what I think was isotope testing, the authorities were pretty sure that they had the same man. Appeals were sent out to the French public, but so far nothing has come in. If the man was 35 to 50 in 2012, this would mean the family missing him was looking for someone born from 1962 to 1977. He was also likely a smoker, as he had tobacco and cigarette papers with him. The beanie seen in the recreation is a depiction of one of the items found with him, along with eyeglasses. He also had a crime thriller novel, and the boots he was wearing were Wellington brand in a size 10. He had random shirts and jogging trousers, and a black Caramore rucksack, an umbrella, a local map, numerous white flannels, mints, and a Kit Kat bar. Items used for camping along with a garden trowel and gloves. He had a flask and a torch and an old Walkman-style radio. He also had a sleeping bag and some more random clothing as well as some Zantac. The police would note there was no obvious trauma, no weapons, no signs he took his life, and it's for this reason they determined it was natural. There's not really any food listed as being with him other than the Kit Kat, but I imagine it wasn't starvation if he still had something left. What's strange about this is he planned to move on, but he was so far away from town. The police believe the best chance of finding his family is to reach out to the people of France, Western Switzerland, and Corsica. The Hampshire Barn Man has gone unidentified for 6 years, but he has likely been missing from his family for at least 12.